And now we're going to have Stelzner from the Squaxin tribe, the biologist and environmental programs and group responsible for things.
Marvel. Yeah. So tribe was asked to sit on this water now. Really, the tribe has a very full and highly accomplished hydrologist named Eric Marquette. She's not here today, so probably for her listening. Then talking about me. So there's a lot of stuff we talked about the Deschutes, some of the issues with water. With that, I'm just going to concentrate on one small piece of that, and that is some low flows can. One of the things that we can do is go out there and find the cooler areas within the whole system. And one of the things we do is called, or you heard about that in we talked earlier about that. Is you're looking using infrared to go look at the system. Really important for the Deschutes because this is the lowest funded the within all the state of Washington, secondary projects. We really have to pick up the place that we want to concentrate on. One of those is the restoration of stations in cooler areas. So we can identify some of these who've flown into my river system, helicopters, so I'm starting to do jobs. And we've identified places that we call cold water refuge sites. So you can have these hot water areas, springs coming up with groundwater, and we've done a lot of storm surveys with that. And when we find wood in these colder areas, over the summers we find fish. So that's like an easy way to start doing conservation and restoration areas. We've also done the entire river, so the whole thing, out the lake, all the way up to the upper walls, and that. And what you have is very cold water coming out of Warehouser on the Vale Stream Farm. Rapidly warms and gets up to the agriculture area. But then there's areas where it starts cooling again. And that's what we call like groundwater. And so they have beaches, and we can talk about identifying those. You can have like you consider gaining or losing water coming in. So losing water means it's flowing through it's percolating down in. Gaining reaches are where water is coming up from the ground, and that's very cold water. And that's some of those important areas of the fish. So that's just an area we can concentrate on work. So we looked at changes in river flows over time, and it was brought up before, but it's really interesting and great about the Deschutes. It's probably arguably the most studied river of the state of Washington. That's one of the western side of the United States. Stuff going on from 30s and really going into the 50s. One of the things that really these huge data sets were able to look at was the decrease in flows over time. And it's really small. It's 0.15% CFS, so 2 feet per second, just the amount of water that's going through. That was really hard to pick up in 1 year, but between 1950 and 2016, what is shown we lost 10 CFS over that time period, where we had over almost 6 years. So, as Nicole was talking about earlier, very flashy system. You have these thousands of CFS in the winter, but down to almost 50 in the summertime. 10 CFS is a lot. That's significant. I'm using that like legal term of significant there. So losing that is that's just habitat that's lost for fish. Climate change, a little bit of the flows. Want to talk about got lost in there. That's here. That's taken away anything to do with rainfall patterns too. So we tease that stuff out. We also have climate change ecologists. Leaders out of 10. I'll talk a little bit about some of the core work in there. We'll start to see some of the effects, a little bit of climate change going around with this. What we expect to see in the future is larger rainfall events and higher peak flows. This goes back to the flashiness of the system. So what you really want to have is rainstorms that are kind of spread out, so the water goes out in these areas we talked about. You do off the channel sites that slowly percolates back into the ground. If you get large rain events, which gives this giant this flashiness, the water is funded out right away with that. So you start to see more of that going on there in the future. We're going to get longer dry seasons, but we don't get a whole lot of rain in the summertime. That's going to be spread out over the less time between spring and fall, and that's going to decrease flows over time. So that Also, air temperatures are expected to go up, and all that has effect on water. So what are we doing about it? You've heard a lot about on-ground stuff. That's we're starting to take off. I'm pretty excited about that. Some of us, what we're doing is we go deep and we try to get people to do their jobs and try and fix some of their stuff. Cole mentioned earlier about TMDL, so that's the total maximum daily loads. Just think about pollutants that you don't want in river systems. So it could be heat, it could be phosphorus, sediments, some of the things we're talking about. We're just talking about the temperature one. The Department of Ecology set up the process, the TMDL process. So what they did is we identify the pollutants that you don't want. You can build a plan on paper about how you can deal with this. The tribe fought really hard in this TMDL to have a lot of quantity put into that, specifically for temperature, and the state would not do it. So their proxy for temperature to be able to deal with that is riparian shape of the nautical system. So they came up with a plan. They identified 44 miles of stream system that needed to be planted with riparian. Came up with a plan that by 2030, this whole thing was going to be done, and they kind of walked away from it. Well, that was 2015 freshwater piece of this was done. And so it's now 10 years later. By the ecology plan, should have 50% of the riparian planted in. But that means today, we should have 22 miles of 150-foot riparian zone and down there. Looking at goal, I don't think that's happening. Not even close. And the idea for ecology is that we'll come back in 2030, maybe 2060, take a look, see what happens, and reproduce the plan. So one of the other things that is be able to talk about this too much is the first fix. That was this whole thing about trying to look at is there enough water that person's in the Republicans really pushed a lot of fix to that, and it's taking about this plan of these within the water resource areas. What can they do? We can still keep drilling wells, but maybe we start doing some mitigation. Everyone at the table, except for one person, is prior to this plan. I think this is the master builders finally voted out. But significantly, everyone else at the table wanted to do an in-stream flow rules. That's just the idea of how much water is out there and how we put it out. Once this plan was voted down, I was one entity. Ecology fixed this thing out, and now they're the ones for task with taking this thing moving forward. They took out the in-stream flow plan that everyone else was sitting at the table had agreed to and put the time forward. So partners around here, the tribe, third of the ecosystem, the city of Tumwater, have only asked ecology that and make in-stream flow rule to like try to quantify and control the amount of waters. So, one thing I do want to touch on, I'm going to go back to my roots and talk about fish really quick. I hear the Deschutes system right down in Tumwater is the falls, and there is a fish blocking waterfall right down there. I've had people bring up several times, like, why are we wasting money on doing work on salmon on a system that never had it? I had two responses to that. One is the teachings I've got from Squaxin tribes. That is not always true, that there were salmon back in that system. Something happened, the ground shook, and the salmon people were blocked off from the watershed. So we actually tried to look at that. So you can look at marine derived nutrients. It's exactly what it sounds like. So fish goes up, goes out into the ocean, picks up nutrients that are only in the salt water, comes back to the river system and dies. It's grown up into the riparian zone, and that those nutrients can be taken on by trees. So you can actually go up there and do recordings to find out. You were never able to find a tree old enough, I can never see something like that. But it's kind of interesting to me that that is one of the ways to be able to take a look at that, is that we're just trying to bring the salmon back, salmon to where they were at one time. My other response to that is we as a society have blocked off thousands of miles of salmon habitats. Because I know that 3-4 miles means not a big deal. So returns, we talked about one of the system is very healthy for pet growth. And it was also a very productive focus area at one time. So 1950s, back in the state of Washington, we should dumping fish everywhere on lunch shoots. 3 years later, a couple of years later, the fish are coming back. And that's when the platter was built out in the lower falls. And that there was only about 3 years of fishing lines in there. The whole city took off on its own. The Deschutes at one point was what had the highest marine survival in the entire west coast of North America. Within that 30% marine survival, so that's the fish, the little ones, the big is going out, the ones returning within that. Late 90s, there was a crash of marine survival in the entire ocean. It was also stuff just within the chute itself. Marine survival went way down, and that's some of the restoration stuff. And but we're starting to see an uptick again in returning polo as far as the system goes. Now, some of that's maybe some of the restoration that's going on. The tribe's working a little bit on very small limited studies about putting supplementation with that. But just in the last few years, where we're seeing natural polo coming back in the numbers of tens of thousands, tens, like 100, we've had now thousands coming back, which is in the last few years. So that's other things staying about the same. So start to see a little bit of a response with that. Very cool.
Thanks, Scott. Well, this is the abilities. And I've read some studies to say, our kinds of group of building audiences pick up and retain anything. We'll find out. We'll be quiz. Get back up on the screen.